Alex Eala walked off center court on Monday evening with a loss. She also walked off as a different player than the one who walked on 9 days earlier. That distinction matters more than the scoreline against Jasmine Paolini, more than the 3-set defeat that ended her run, and more than any single number on any ranking spreadsheet. Because what happened to Alex Eala at Wimbledon 2026 was not a tournament. It was a transformation conducted in public under the oldest and most unforgiving lights in tennis, and the WTA rankings now carry the receipt. Let me give you the number first because I know that is why many of you clicked. Alex Eala is projected to rise to a new career high of world number 28 in the WTA live rankings following her 4th-round run at the 2026 Wimbledon Championships. She entered the tournament ranked 32. She collected 240 ranking points across 4 matches, pushing her total from 1556 to 1666. That 4-spot climb might look modest on paper. It is anything but modest when you trace the road that produced it. 6 months ago in January, Eala was ranked 53. 12 months before Wimbledon, she was sitting at 140. The distance between 140 and 28 is not a ranking change. It is a complete reclassification of who a player is and what tournaments are obligated to let her into. It changes her seeding. It changes her draw placement. It changes which opponents she avoids in the first week and which ones she earns the right to face in the second. For a 21-year-old from a country that has never had a player achieve anything close to this in the professional era, each incremental digit carries weight that the ranking algorithm cannot calculate. But rankings are abstractions. The Wimbledon fortnight was not abstract at all. So, let me take you through it the way it actually happened. Eala's opening match against Ranatata Zerzua on day 2 barely required a second gear. 61-62. The Filipina broke early in both sets, controlled the tempo from the baseline, and closed it out in under an hour, a clean, unremarkable win. The kind of first-round result that disappears from memory within 24 hours, except that it was Eala's first main draw victory at Wimbledon. She had lost in the opening round on her debut the year before. This time, the win felt inevitable from the 3rd game onward. That shift from tentative debutante to comfortable operator took exactly 12 months and about 40 professional matches on grass to complete. Round 2 delivered something far less comfortable. Maya Joint stood on the other side of the net, and if that name triggers a specific memory, it should. In the 2025 Eastbourne final, Eala held 4 championship points against Joint and failed to convert any of them. Joint clawed back to win the title in one of the most agonizing defeats of Eala's young career. That match had marked the first time a Filipino woman had ever reached a WTA singles final. And the loss stung precisely because of how close the milestone had come to being so much bigger. At Wimbledon, Joint had already announced herself by upsetting Serena Williams in the first round. She was not going to be a polite opponent, and she proved it immediately, taking the first set 63. The old wound was open. Center court, still a relatively unfamiliar environment for Eala, could have swallowed her whole in that moment. Former versions of her might have tightened, might have let the first set deficit and the memory of Eastbourne compound into something unmanageable. Instead, she produced one of the more remarkable turnarounds of the entire tournament. 6-2 in the second set. 6-love in the third, a 9-aim finishing run that did not look like relief. It looked like authority. The Eastbourne ghost did not vanish. I just walked straight through it. Then came Saturday, day 6. The match that changed everything. Iga Świątek, the defending Wimbledon champion, the 3 seed, a 6-time Grand Slam winner, stood between Eala and the second week. The two had played once before at the 2025 Miami Open, where Eala had pulled off a similar upset to reach the semifinals. But Miami is a hard court in March. Wimbledon center court on a Saturday afternoon is something else entirely. The weight of the occasion, the crowd, the opponent's pedigree, all of it conspired to make this look like a bridge too far. Eala did not play a conservative match. She could not afford to. Her serve, which has never been a weapon by WTA standards, was landing in the mid-70s in miles per hour. Against most top players, that is an invitation to attack. Against Świątek, whose return game has been one of the best in the sport for years. It should have been a liability. Instead, Eala flipped the script. She stepped inside the baseline to return Świątek's serve. She ran around her backhand at every opportunity to unleash her left-handed forehand, redirecting rallies with angles that Świątek could not close down. She made the defending champion uncomfortable in her own house. The first set lasted 84 minutes. 84 minutes for a single set of tennis. Świątek had 2 set points in the tie-break and could not convert either. On the first, she worked the point into a position she liked and then failed to pull the trigger on the finishing shot. On the second, a forehand return sailed wide. Iga saved both with a kind of composure that does not come from talent alone. It comes from having been in those spots before, from having lost from those spots before, and from having decided somewhere in the quiet hours between matches that she would not lose from them again. Eala took the tiebreak 11 points to 9. In the second set, Świątek unraveled. She went down for love. She briefly rallied to 42 and the center court crowd leaned forward, waiting for the kind of champion's comeback that Wimbledon mythology demands. It never came. Eala held firm, broke again, and when match point arrived on a 65 mph second serve that Świątek could not handle, she collapsed on her back on the grass. What followed was the moment that turned a tennis result into something larger. In her on-court interview, Eala was asked how it felt to have just defeated the defending champion on center court. She began to answer and then her voice broke. Maybe for someone like Iga who has won so many slams or someone like Serena or Venus, this achievement may seem small, but for someone who grew up in the Philippines, she paused, tears coming freely now. I want to train with my brother and grandfather every day after school with my ruffled socks and my light-up shoes. And chubby cheeks. For her, this is everything. Then she collected herself. Her eyes sharpened. But just because I'm emotional doesn't mean I'm satisfied. On to the next round. That pivot from raw vulnerability to competitive clarity in the span of 10 seconds told you everything about where Eala is in her development. She is old enough to understand what moments mean and young enough to refuse to let meaning become a ceiling. The post on Reddit capturing her speech drew over 6,000 upvotes. Comments poured in from Filipino fans, from Southeast Asian fans, from people who had never watched a tennis match, but recognized something real in a 21-year-old crying on the most famous court in the world and then immediately reminding herself and everyone listening that she was not done yet. The problem, of course, is that Jasmine Paolini was waiting on Monday. And Paolini, for all her struggles in 2026, is a former Wimbledon finalist who knows exactly what center court demands. Eala had beaten Pini earlier in the season in Dubai 61-76, but that was a different surface, a different moment and a different version of both players. Wimbledon. Paolini came out targeting Eala's second serve with the precision of someone who had studied it and prepared for it. The Italian broke in the fourth game of the first set, backed it up with a hold, and opened a 4-1 lead before Eala could settle. Eala fought back, broke to make it 5-4, but Paolini broke right back to close the set 6-4. The second set was Eala at her competitive best. Down a set, facing break points at 0-40 in the 8th game. She reeled off 5 consecutive points to hold for 5-3. That hold was one of the most clutch sequences of her season. She closed out the set 6-4 and forced a decider. In the third set, both players held through 4 games. Then Paolini's experience made the difference. The Italian held a tight 5th game when Eala had pushed to 0-30. She broke in the 8th game. She finished with a 3-game run to take the match 64-46-63. It was a loss, but it was not a collapse. It was a younger player running into a harder, more experienced opponent who executed slightly better in the moments that mattered. The margin was exactly what Eala described in her post-match press conference. Very fine details. I gave everything that I could, Eala said afterward. I did everything that I could do today, so I'm proud of that. When asked about managing the emotions from the switch victory just 48 hours earlier, she was direct. This is not the first time I've had a huge win and then had to play 2 days after. I think I prepared pretty well for this match. The day after the loss, Eala posted a photo on Instagram making a heart sign to the center court crowd. Her caption was 4 words in 2 languages. Everything Salomat Wimbledon. Now, let us talk about what the new ranking actually means in practical terms. At 28, Ella will be seeded at nearly every tournament she enters for the rest of the season. At Grand Slams, seeding begins at 32. She is now comfortably inside that threshold. That means at the US Open in August, she will not face a top 32 player in the first round. She will be placed in a protected position in the draw. For a player whose game relies on building confidence through early round wins, she tends to play her way into form rather than arriving with it. The seating advantage is enormous. The ranking also validates a grass court season that was by any measure the best stretch of tennis Ella has played in her career. The Birmingham title in early June was her second WTA 125 championship. The Berlin semifinals, where she beat world number 2 Elena Rybakina and former world number 3 Alina Svitolina before falling to Linda Noskova, announced that her grass court form was not a lower-level anomaly, and Wimbledon confirmed it with a scalp that nobody outside her own team could have reasonably predicted. Across the entire grass season compiled a record that tells its own story. Birmingham champion, Berlin semi-finalist, Wimbledon 4th round, including a win over the defending champion. Her win-loss record on grass in 2026 stands as the most dominant surface-specific stretch by any Filipino tennis player in the sport's history, a statement that is both factually accurate and illustrative of how empty the category was before she filled it. The contrast with her clay season makes the grass numbers even more striking. On clay, Eala won just 2 matches across 5 tournaments. She lost in the first round of the French Open. She was beaten in the early rounds at Madrid, Stuttgart, and Rome. The surface exposed every part of her game that relies on timing and pace rather than physical grinding. Grass rescued her ranking and in some ways rescued her season. The fast, low-bouncing surface lets her lefty forehand do damage that clay absorbs. It rewards her volleys, which she has been quietly developing with her coaching team at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. And it turns her deceptively slow serve into a harder read because the ball stays low and skids instead of sitting up. That last detail is worth dwelling on because Iga Świątek said something remarkable about it in her own press conference after the loss. "I think it was tougher mentally for me to accept these missed returns from the slow serves," Świątek admitted. "I know it was slow. I know exactly how it's going to come to me. It's such a different rhythm than what I usually have a chance to return." She added that, as the second set went on, Ella seemed to serve slower and slower and it became tougher and tougher for her. 65 mph second serve, neutralizing a 6-time Grand Slam champion because the grass altered its physics just enough. That is not power tennis. That is environmental intelligence. The ability to understand what a specific court surface will do to a specific shot and then lean into it rather than apologize for it. Looking at the broader 2026 season, the ranking trajectory tracks a player learning in real time which parts of the tour suit her and which parts she still needs to develop for. January at 53, a surge to 29 in March after strong results at Indian Wells and Dubai. A painful slide back to 46 during the clay swing as points from her 2025 Miami semi-final dropped off and new results did not replace them. Then the grass season intervened like a lifeline, pulling her from 35 in mid-June to 28 by the time Wimbledon concluded. The season chart looks like a heartbeat monitor. Spikes, dips, recovery, spikes again. And that volatility is characteristic of a player who has not yet developed consistency across all surfaces but has developed something equally valuable on the surface where she is strongest: the ability to beat anyone. 2 top 10 wins on grass this season. Rybakina in Berlin. Świątek at Wimbledon. A victory over Filipino in Dubai. A quarter-final run against Coco Gauff in the same tournament. Eala is no longer a player who occasionally punches above her weight. She is a player whose weight class is genuinely changing and the ranking now reflects it. The question going forward is what she does with this positioning. The hard court season begins almost immediately. The Canadian Open and Cincinnati are on the horizon before the US Open. Ella reached the semi-finals in Miami last year and the round of 16 this year, so her hardcore credentials are not in question. What is in question is whether her body can sustain the schedule. She acknowledged at Wimbledon that she was wearing preventive tape on her left forearm and that it had been a long season. 21-year-olds are not immune to the physical toll of competing at this level week after week, and the second half of the season will test whether her fitness infrastructure anchored at the Rafa Nadal Academy can support the ambition that her ranking now demands. There is also the matter of expectations in the Philippines. Eala has become the most prominent active athlete in the country. Comparisons to Manny Pacquiao, however imprecise, are being made not because the sports are similar, but because the emotional function is the same. A single person carrying an entire nation's pride into arenas where that nation has never before been represented. That way, it is real even when it is invisible. Eala has handled it with a maturity that belies her age. But the next 6 months will ask her to handle it while also defending ranking points, managing fatigue, and continuing to improve the parts of her game, particularly on clay, that remain incomplete. For now, though, the number is 28. The memory is center court. The light-up shoes and chubby cheeks have become a rallying cry for a country that finally has a tennis player worth staying up all night to watch. And somewhere in that Instagram caption, "Everything Salamat Wimbledon" is the honest summary of a fortnight that gave Alex Eala exactly what she needed. Not a trophy. Not yet. Something harder to win and harder to lose. Proof that she belongs in the room where the trophies are handed out and that the next time she walks into it, she will not be arriving as a guest.